And I'm really pleased to introduce to you journalist and author Mike Dickson. Mike, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm fine, thank you, John. Very cold. It's absolutely freezing in London here.
Yeah, I find that I'm in Bonn near Cologne, and to be honest with you, whenever the weather is cold here, it tends to be cold in London. We're at a fairly similar level, and we're not that far away. Mike, it's been a listen. We're going to talk about Raducanu for the next 20 minutes or so, but just before, there has been some news today. Boris Becker has been released from a prison in London, and we're not quite sure where he's going to pop up next. I believe he's going to be deported to Germany. Do we know if he's going to be going into prison in Germany or what the situation is?
No, I don't believe so. No, I think he's been released from jail in the UK under a sort of fast track scheme, I guess, of people who are no danger to the public, which I don't think he is. But I think as a condition of that, he has to go back to his the country of his citizenship, which is Germany. And the suggestion is, I think, that he was flying to Stuttgart, I believe.
Oh, okay. Wow. There's been a lot of, I guess there'd be a lot of attention. And of course, I'm based in Germany, so there's been a lot of attention here. But we've even got him on a flight tracker to see where he pops up. My big question is, do the Germans want him for some reason? I know he's had issues in the past here. I think in 2002 there was an issue, but he's been living in London since 2012.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's really been. I think he's spent a lot of time in London even prior to that. You know, it's been pretty much his home, I think. Obviously, someone who travels around a lot, and it remains to be seen. You know, when he will be allowed to come back to the UK. I would imagine he'd like to come back as soon as he can, because I do know Boris, and I know he loves it. In London. I'm not saying he doesn't like it in Germany, but he does enjoy it in London and does some work here. So, yeah, interesting to see. It's very early days, and there were rumours yesterday that he was leaving, but I think it is actually definitely true this afternoon.
Yeah, the British Home Office didn't speak about his case specifically, but they did say basically in a broader sense that this is actually quite common policy for non-British citizens, as you say, who don't pose a threat to the public at all, to be allowed to return to their home country. I think it's after 6 months, and he's been behind bars for 8. Listen, that is perhaps for another time, though, Mike. Let's get into it, because I know that both of us are a little pressed for time, and we want to talk about Emma Raducanu. First of all, I mean, you've written this book. Let's add that to the stream, and it's obviously available in all good bookstores, and as here we can see the Amazon link to it. The first question I have for you is actually the question that pops up on the screen here regarding Emma. Tell us a little bit about her journey, at least from obscurity to Wimbledon, which is when really she came into the mainstream.
Well, I think the case with Emma was that people who are sort of reasonably plugged into the British game knew that she was an outstanding prospect. There were big things being predicted from her really from about the age of 14 onwards. She actually won her first pro title when she was 15. But a sort of conspiracy, I suppose, of her wanting to finish her education pretty much, and the pandemic arriving in March 2020, and the fact also that she didn't excel particularly well in the junior Grand Slams. That was partly because she was often prioritizing her education. Those kind of things combined meant that she really was totally off the radar when she kind of burst through at Wimbledon 2021. She's from, I think it's fairly well documented, she's from Kent originally. Learned her tennis at the Bromley Tennis Centre, attended a girls' grammar school that's very difficult to get into, which is a testament to the fact that she's pretty bright. Mm-hmm. And the book really is to tell the story of how she came to win the US Open and about the actual US Open itself. I was, by largely favourable circumstances, I was actually able to be at Flushing Meadows to see her win the title. It was a bit of luck in a way that I got the clearance required from the US government, and I also had renewed my media visa shortly before the pandemic, so I was in reasonably good shape to go, I guess. Anyway, the book kind of, gives some background to how she came up. I spoke to a lot of people who are involved in her development, and then there's the whole account of that remarkable summer, which started just before Wimbledon. Well, it started with her finishing her A-levels, really. Very quickly, she shone at Wimbledon and then sort of retreated into the shadows a bit while she played in America, fairly incognito. And then, of course, she burst into prominence at the US Open.
She certainly did. Let's just talk about her little moment at Wimbledon, though. That's when she sort of came to prominence for most of us anyway. I think she got to the third or the fourth round there that year, and, with some sensational tennis. And that's when she certainly came to the British public's, side. We also got the comments from John McEnroe regarding her mental and physical state and the connection between the two. Because of course she I think she pulled out sick in the end of her match, or she certainly had some sickness issues, didn't she, Mike, at that tournament? What did you make of the McEnroe comments?
Well, she was quite interesting because there was a slight uproar about them, predictably, on social media. But the following day, she pretty much confirmed McEnroe's theory, really, that it had all got a bit much for her. I think the key thing there was that she didn't actually walk on court until, I think it was just before 8 o'clock. And,
Okay.
She really was never used to having to wait. By then there was huge public hype, build-up and hype around that match. And she was playing, she hadn't really played under lights, let alone in front of that sort of many people in that feverish atmosphere. And, it probably got on top of her a bit, and she sort of confirmed that afterwards. So I didn't really personally have a huge problem with McEnroe, and particularly with hindsight, because she didn't really object to that herself.
I think Marcus Rashford also expressed similar thoughts in terms of the fact that he had himself a similar issue in terms of feeling unwell, and the pressure got to him, I think, when he said he was a junior. That is a unique element to tennis, because you just don't know when you're going on court. At least if you're another sports player, you're starting at 8 o'clock or 3 o'clock or whatever time, and that's fixed in the diary. But for tennis players, they just have to wait. The earlier schedule time is announced, but with other matches, undetermined amounts of time, you just don't know. And I've always wondered how that must be really tricky.
Well, I think it's the sort of thing that comes with experience. If you're someone like Andy Murray or Novak Djokovic, for example, you've gone through that process probably literally hundreds of times, when to warm up, when to eat, how it particularly suits your body. And at the time, I think that was something complete, well, as a lot of things were that fortnight, it was completely new to Emma Raducanu. But you're right, tennis is quite different like that. You compare it to, say, the Open Golf, where Rory McIlroy is given a tee time of 9:52 a.m. and if he's not on the tee at 9:52 a.m., he's out. So they start. Tennis actually has a real problem, in my view, actually starting promptly when they say they're going to start. But if you remember, also there was some controversy that day because all the other women's matches started earlier in the day, and her particular backlog, she was scheduled later than the others, and then I think it was Felix Auger-Aliassime and Alex Zverev had a very long 5-setter in the match before her. So, it was a kind of confluence of circumstances, I suppose.
I can see one or two questions flying in for you already, Mike. We'll address them at the end of the show, so audience, be patient. We will get to your questions. But first of all, let's talk about that US Open run. As you say, the book kind of does focus far more on that, and obviously the build-up to it. Of course, she came through the qualifiers without dropping a set. And then, of course, she actually went on to win the title without dropping a set. Tell us a bit about that journey and how it's documented in the book.
Well, it was 10 matches, and as you say, without dropping a set. I wasn't actually there for the qualifying, although I did watch it. And she just gained more and more momentum, and it's a bit of a cliche, but the stars definitely did align for her. I think, as I say in the book, the kind of performance that really made you sit upright was the third round when she played Sarah Sorribes Tormo of Spain, when she just Emma just absolutely mashed her. And I mean, she was lucky to win a game. This really very decent Spanish player who gets an awful lot of balls back, and Emma just completely beat her to a pulp, really. And then you thought, blimey, something quite special could happen here. And then going into the second week of the main tournament, obviously she played the 3 qualifying matches before. In fact, arguably her toughest match of the tournament was the second round qualifying against a Georgian player. But anyway, once I think she'd put in that performance, her confidence was sky high. And I think the more senior players that she then faced in the second week up until the final found it really quite intimidating playing her, and it kind of came across that way. But all credit to Emma, she seized the hour, and there's no arguing really with someone who wins a Grand Slam without dropping a set.
Right. I mean, as you said, you were fortunate enough to go there for the final. There was a huge amount of media attention in the UK on her and on the match. I believe terrestrial TV got the rights. All of a sudden, I think Channel 4 was airing it. Journalists like yourself from the UK, no doubt, were flocking out there. I think Virginia Wade flew in for the final. Am I right on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's not totally correct, because there actually, I mean, I was there from earlier in the tournament. Okay. But in fact, there were very few media there because numbers were very restricted. And, going back in time, it was difficult to get into the US that time. So in fact, and this, perhaps was a helpful thing for her that there wasn't a massive media scrum, because there simply weren't many people from the media there. There weren't even that many Americans, if my memory serves me correctly. What was the second part of your question? Sorry.
Virginia Wade was there.
Oh, Virginia. Yeah, Virginia. Because Virginia's lived in New York for going back to the mid 80s, and I think Virginia came certainly the whole of the second week. She was, well, as far as I know, she was there certainly for the last kind of 8 days, I think. But Virginia, it's not unusual to see her at the US Open because she's actually pretty local.
I guess, therefore, the media scrum ensued afterwards, because I think there was certainly a lot more British journalists in attendance. I think it was Indian Wells a few weeks later. But the as you say, probably the media scrum emerged in the wake of her victory, particularly as COVID restrictions relaxed. Tell us about the day. Tell us about the final inside the stadium. I mean, she handled the pressure very well that day.
Yeah, well, it was a pretty amazing day anyway. If you've been in New York on the anniversary of 9/11, and this was the anniversary of night. In fact, I think it was 20 years to the day, and it's always that morning particularly is very sober atmosphere around town. And for example, there's a fire station just a couple of blocks from where my hotel was, and there was a kind of big service remembrance outside the fire station. Joe Biden was in town, so quite a few roads were closed. Okay. So it's a kind of unusual, special day anyway. The atmosphere was terrific. I think there was real interest in the whole, and a kind of, after such a difficult period for tennis, there was real sense of expectation about 2 young players. They're both fresh, both very attractive personalities. And people were captivated not just by the story of Raducanu, but also of Leylah Fernandez, who obviously from just over the border in Canada. Yeah. So the whole thing, it was a really amazing day, a great build-up. The atmosphere was terrific. I mean, it wasn't particularly partial one way or the other, possibly a little bit more in favor of Leylah Fernandez. But it really, there was a sense that after all the kind of struggles of COVID and everything being restricted, this was a brilliant thing, seeing a full stadium and 2 players of such promise, who'd made it through to the final.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so now she wins the tournament without dropping a set. Now the expectation comes, and in particular, of course, as we said before, from the British media. Tell me about the reaction in the UK afterwards.
Well, I wasn't there immediately afterwards. I think I flew home on the Monday night, pretty exhausted, I have to say. I shifted a enormous word mountain that second week of the US Open because there was so much interest. But clearly, I mean, life-changing really doesn't go far enough in saying that, she arrived there. She's obviously done well at Wimbledon, but nobody expected her to win. And her life has never been the same since and never will be again. It's something that no one can take away from her, whatever happens now. But obviously, the switch round was huge, and suddenly she's one of the most famous people in the whole country. I think it was a mistake. I mean, it's quite difficult to second guess coaching things, but certainly it seemed a mistake to make this very early decision on Andrew Richardson, who'd coached her at the US Open, because it created, there was already deafening noise around her, and this only kind of created more noise and possibly sort of added to the considerable pressure on her. And, I guess you'd have to say in the cold light of day, she's yet to play as well since as she did at the US Open. And it's kind of well documented. There have been coaches coming and going. There's been a lot of instability in her setup, which, I don't think has probably helped. So that was kind of, there was a kind of homecoming thing at the LTA, if I recall rightly, about 7 or 8 days after she won. She got back, I think, on the Friday or something. Anyway, it was kind of the next week, I think, at Roehampton, there was a big homecoming event that the BBC covered. And it was there, actually, that the news came out about Andrew Richardson. And, it's not been a particularly smooth ride since. I don't think it was ever going to be, under whatever circumstances. I don't think it would have been a particularly easy ride for her in the wake in the wake of the US Open. And obviously any mistakes that you do make are made very publicly.
I think this is what I do know, at least to the best of my fact. No, I do know it, is that Andrew has remained very tight-lipped in the 12, 18 months or whatever it is since that US Open win. I think he doesn't want to, get involved in what's gone on since, which I don't know if that says anything. But I think what does clearly say something is the constant changes in the coaching situation. I hope that there is some stability, as you suggested, for 2023. But I know that there has been a suggestion that she wants to have, or her team, if you like, the people around her want to have specific coaches, a volleying coach, a serve coach. And so rather than just having one coach like pretty much every other player on the tour, she wants to have a variety of coaches. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, or even the ending with Andrew.
Well, it certainly has been the case in the past that they've looked for specific advice for specific shots, and you'd have to say whatever her and her family have done. She's got a US Open title. I mean, she's 76 in the world. She finished the year. It's not an outright disaster by any means. In fact, she probably played better on the clay than I was expecting. Actually, I thought that could be a really tough learning curve. But she won quite a few matches, put up a very good fight when she played Iga Swiatek. But it does slightly concern me that you want to be kind of getting an identity into your game and consistency into your game and consistent messages. And I think that is a bit of a fear among, speaking to coaches who, people want the best for Emma Raducanu. I mean, ultimately she has to do, I suppose, what she thinks works for her. But you would worry a bit if there are sort of a lot of technical tinkering, a lot of different voices going into her ear.
Yeah, definitely. What are your thoughts on her in 2023? I mean, what could be the goals? What are realistic thoughts regarding next year for Emma?
Well, I was discussing this with a few people actually just the other day. It's interesting to kind of project where her ranking ends up. I mean, I think the most important thing for her is that she gets the physical side right, and I think there are signs that she's going to get a more consistent guiding light on the kind of getting herself prepared to stand up to the physical rigors of the tour, which are considerable. That's obviously been a big problem this year. So I think that, you know, if she stays relatively fit, I do think she's going to improve. Difficult to say. I mean, it's difficult to say anything with any assuredness about women's tennis right now. It's so unpredictable and up in the air. A lot of players are very similar standard, but I would expect her to have. I think she'll probably have some good weeks, one or two standout weeks possibly. I wouldn't be surprised to see her around 30 in the world this time next year.
Yeah.
But really, what you want to see, I guess, are, you know, certainly by Wimbledon, you'd want to see signs of, you know, consistent wins week in, week out, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, a positive win-loss ratio in a year from now would be great. I think if she goes deep in one or two tournaments, and who knows, maybe even picks up a trophy or two. And I'm not necessarily talking about majors. I think, of course, she set the bar pretty high in 2021, which probably skewed our thoughts regarding 2022. You did touch on the issues there. There have been one or two questions coming in regarding the wrist, for example, and I believe that she may well have changed her strings on her racket. As a result, we also had the blisters as well. Jean as well is asking about, you know, about the physical improvements. Of course, she's still very young. You did touch on them there, but do you think there are signs of positivity that we are going to see a healthy 2023?
Well, I think there are signs, partly because, yeah, I do think she's a worker and she's very ambitious. I don't think she's shirking. I don't think that's been the issue. I think a positive thing has been the involvement of Jez Green, who's a highly respected physical trainer. I don't think we should overstate how much time he's going to spend with Raducanu on the road. I think he will devote some time to her, but he's also tied up with Dominic Thiem. And I think that's a positive thing. She may well spend some more time with Will Herbert, the LTA physio who was with her in New York. So I think it does. There's been a lot to assimilate in the last 14 months for her. And you know, I just hope she's learned some of the lessons. Everyone has to learn lessons. You know, doesn't matter which walk of life you're in. You know, hers is a pretty tough public learning curve, and I'm basically a believer in her potential. I don't expect her to win a Grand Slam this year for sure, but I think what we'd all like to see are signs of the kind of fluency that emerged at Wimbledon and the US Open. I don't expect it to be week in, week out, her in the semis and finals of events. But you certainly you're looking for concrete strides from the last 12 months.
I will just ask one more question before you go. Do you think she should have pursued with Richardson for a bit longer?
Well, I think she should have done, probably. I mean, you know, it's slightly difficult to second guess these things, but clearly he did a good job in America because they traveled together prior to that as well. And I just think strategically it would have been good to have that consistency when there was so much else changing in her life. And if it didn't work out within 6 months, and it might not have worked out within 6 months, then it would have been, you know, then at least there would have been a calmer atmosphere around her. I mean, I do know Andrew Richardson, and he's got a pretty good tennis brain, actually, and good work ethic. So, you know, I don't think there could have been any concerns on that front. Possibly better to have engaged him and then see how it went than create this extra noise. But as I say, I don't think it was ever going to be a particularly easy easier. But I think it'd be fascinating to see how it plays out in the next 12 months.
Couldn't agree more, Mike. Listen, thank you for stopping by. I've put a link to your book in the description below this video, so make sure you check that out. Tennis is Coming Home. I want to get the right name for the book again.
When Tennis Came Home.
Tennis Came Home. I'll put it here in front of me again. Yeah, it's a nice one, obviously.
I mean, I just hope it's a good primer. It's obviously not the end of the story, far from it. But it's what I've set out to do is join the dots, and it's kind of all in one place. And as I say, I'm sure in future there'll be other books written about it. But I hope I've achieved my aim of making this a decent and also a fair kind of primer about her career.
Mike, thanks for stopping by. It was great chatting to you for the last half an hour about Emma Raducanu. And as you say, the journey is still at its beginning, if you like.
Well, it is. It is early days. I mean, she only turned 20 in November, and we're seeing tennis players' careers extend deep into their 30s now in a way that they never used to. So you're right, very early days.
Thank you very much, Mike. And to the rest of you as well, I'm going to play you out this little video. Mike and I will sail off into the sunset. But for the rest of you, thanks for joining us today. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're new. Hit the notification bell in the corner and get your comments in the section below. Thank you very much, Mike, for coming by today.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on all things tennis.